It's funny because the first thing that Mr. Peanut Butter says to Bojack, season one, episode one, is, "Can you believe this? The two of us in the same house? Is this a crossover episode?" But by season six, not only do they get that crossover episode, but Bojack is actually living with Mr. Peanut Butter. And it's funny because Bojack was trying to avoid Mr. Peanut Butter the whole series. And Mr. Peanut Butter ends up being the only one to like allow him to live with him by the end of the series. And this is not saying, oh, because Mr. Peanut Butter cares so much about him. I genuinely feel that Mr. Peanut Butter does like Bojack. He admires Bojack and he wants to genuinely be friends with Bojack. But at the same time, Peanut Butter ain't shit because it's like after everything that has come out about Bojack, you don't question him. The only time Mr. Peanut Butter questioned Bojack or like actually confronted him was when it came to Diane, and he knew that he made a move on Diane. Other than that, Mr. Peanut Butter describes Bojack as a good guy, right? And my problem with that is the fact that Bojack is not a good guy. But the fact that Mr. Peanut Butter, he opens up his house not just because, he feels like Bojack is a good guy, but also because he's lonely. But my thing is, it really shows you, the viewer, how skewed Mr. Peanut Butter's moral compass is and what he views who is a good guy. But mind you, he also thinks of himself as a good guy as well. At the end, we see Mr. Peanut Butter getting, some type of insight, which is nice. There's some hope there. But this whole time, like, he considers himself a good dog, a good boy, a good guy, right? And so for him to say that, even in season six, that, oh, Bojack, you're a good guy and everything like that, he's completely dismissing everything that Bojack has said, even on television, even when it comes to Sarah Lynn and everything like that, basically saying that, oh yeah, I called my phone from her phone while she was actively dying. I waited 17 minutes to call the cops, and then she ends up dying, in the hospital. That's not a good guy. And that's just one aspect of the things that, Bojack has done. And he's admitted that on television. So just like how Mr. Peanut Butter was very dismissive in his relationships, like with women, he's very dismissive even when it comes to his friendships. And although he did confront Bojack on the whole Diane situation, you could tell that did bother him. And I feel like this is a nod to him being like, a lab/golden retriever. He couldn't stay mad at Bojack very long, especially because he puts Bojack on this certain type of pedestal. And also, I feel like him calling Bojack out about Diane, even though he took a long time to do so, it's like a nod to the patriarchy where it's just like, oh, I'm calling you out on this because you trying to get at my girl, knowing that I'm with her. Not even my girl at the time. I believe they was already married, or I think they was engaged. Point of the matter is, I would just say my girl. You're trying to get at my girl knowing that I'm with her, and me as a man, that's disrespectful. Compared to him calling Bojack out on anything else, anything that dealt with, Bojack being a womanizer or being a terrible person or grooming women or having control over women and using them to his pleasure, whatever the fuck. Even just the stuff with Sarah Lynn, which crazy. Never mentioned that. At the end of season six, still saying that, oh, you're a good guy. But oh, the one thing I'm going to call you out on is Diane. Even when I'm a dismissive person, even in my romantic relationships, and I think that I act like everything's okay. I just try to fix things, whatever the case is. But I'm going to call you out on this Diane shit because that was disrespectful to me. Because man to man, that was disrespectful. So it shows, again, Mr. Peanut Butter is just a man. And he's not a good guy at that. He's not a good man. But there is hope toward the end. But yeah, just wanted to add that. But I actually like the fact that, he opened up his home to Bojack and things like that. And especially the fact that he said, I think, you're a good guy. Because Mr. Peanut Butter and Bojack both aren't good guys. They aren't. It just is what it is. They just do things differently, right? They have different approaches to stuff. Like, they're just in different fonts, but they're not good guys. And it's funny that they ended up alone at the end of the series in that house by themselves alone. No, everybody has moved on, right? Mr. Peanut Butter doesn't have any romantic partners anymore. Yes, business is still booming for him and that's fine, but he is alone and it just is what it is. He's always had somebody there with him, right? And Bojack is alone. Princess Carolyn's moved on, Diane's moved on, Todd's moved on. And so here we are with these two good guys alone, and all they have is each other. And I just find that very ironic because if they were actually good guys, they probably wouldn't be alone. They would probably be surrounded by people who actually love them and care about them and who can depend on them and who they could depend on. But I think that's just a perfect nod to be like, are you guys really good? So Bojack and Diane parallel each other in more ways than one, but one of the ways was definitely how they had trouble writing about themselves and their trauma. Because in season one, Bojack had a hard time trying to start his autobiography, right? Similar to how Diane had a hard time trying to start her memoir. But Bojack wasn't just having a hard time because, for one, he was not a writer. For two, he lazy as hell. And for three, he's Bojack. He ain't writing no damn autobiography. But also because he would have to talk about his trauma, right? And similar to how Diane wasn't able to really grab her trauma out those little cabinets that she compartmentalized them in, right? She had everything so suppressed she couldn't even tell what was what, and she tried to blame it on the antidepressants. And I'm not gonna say that that had nothing to do with it. I understand that antidepressants has a lot have a lot of different symptoms and side effects, but I think it was because it's hard to talk about your trauma. For one, it's hard to confront that. For two, like she said, she's trying to pull it out of like this file cabinet, but she can't. And it was because she has it compartmentalized. She has it tucked away and suppressed because it's her deep, dark trauma. It's what has shaped her. And similar to how Bojack didn't like to talk about his family, he didn't really want to talk about his trauma. Diane didn't really want to either, but she felt that she had to in order to make it all worthwhile. Like she says, if she doesn't make a book out of her trauma that can, eventually help somebody else who was like her when she was younger, then what was it all for? And this also means that she could have been happy this whole time instead of like kind of like letting that trauma define her and holding on to it so tightly. And it reminds me of the anxiety that Bojack had in season one about his autobiography, where he was saying, it's too much pressure, right? This book is my one shot at preserving my legacy. I'm a joke, and if this book, isn't good, I'm gonna be a joke forever. And then he proceeds to have an anxiety attack. Him and Diane both thought their trauma made them special. And we even see this when Bojack, is trying to stay at the rehab, and he's just like, I'm a special case. I can't go back out there. Like, I'm gonna relapse, I have to stay here, right? And the therapy horse is like, look, other people need these rooms to get help. The real work happens out there, right? You have to take control of your life, get your shit together. That's the hard part. Because ultimately everybody has trauma. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, yes, some people are more traumatized than others, but everybody experiences trauma, and they also experience it in a different way, and they also respond to it a different way and choose to navigate life differently. But mind you, everybody has had these traumatic experiences and events, right? And somebody could be more traumatized than Bojack, even though, yes, he grew up with a shitty household and like shitty parents, and they were utter trash. They were. But somebody could be even more traumatized than Bojack and still wouldn't choose to treat people the way he treated people, or to continue to create victims the way that he did. That's still a choice. Like, having trauma doesn't justify you to be a terrible person or to continue to victimize yourselves while you are creating other victims. But like I was saying, Diane and Bojack parallel each other in the sense of them trying to make their trauma mean something, because for them it's like, well, that couldn't have just happened to me just to happen. I have to make it mean something, or else it just happened. And it reminds me of the last scene of the series where, Bojack's like, life's a bitch and then you die. And Diane's like, well, sometimes life's a bitch and you just got to keep on living. And I feel like that was Diane truly coming to terms with, what happened to me, or what I experienced is what I experienced, but I'm choosing to move forward and live on and navigate life in a more healthier way instead of hanging on to that trauma. Meanwhile, in the beginning of the series, or the first half of the series, it was more of like life's a bitch and then you die, where they're trying to make meaning of life being a bitch to them. And if they feel like they didn't make meaning in the way that they feel like it will be the most meaningful, right? Whether they can benefit from that trauma. Okay, I have to either write a book on this, or a memoir, or I have to. It got to be something, a movie, something to where I can benefit from the terrible things that has happened to me to make it worth something. Then I won't be happy. I will feel unfulfilled. I don't know what to do, right? And because they weren't able to do that, I feel like they were stuck for a very, very long time. So it was nice to see that Diane finally came to that conclusion. And I feel like it's kind of leaving the door open to where it seemed like also Bojack is slowly, very slowly, but surely coming to that realization as well of like, I can do other things to help people. I can choose to use that trauma um, and that life seasoning to help other people in other ways. It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be a memoir. Even though Bojack did get his book, but even though he wasn't happy about it when it first happened, even though it did give him the notoriety that he was saying that he wanted, but it doesn't have to be the way that you think. It's already happened. The trauma's already happened, right? The experience, the life seasoning, the traumatic events, it's already happened. And it has shaped who you are. And you get to choose how you navigate that moving forward, right? And all throughout the series, we're seeing Bojack and Diane self-sabotage. And they say it's because of their trauma, but it's just like, but that's still a choice. You don't have to continue to self-sabotage. Just like how her boyfriend, well, now husband, but her boyfriend at the time was just like, she was just like, I just want to be happy. And he's like, then just be happy. Just choose to be happy. Now, of course, when there's chemical imbalances, we understand that it gets a little complicated. But in the sense of you could choose just to be happy. If this book is stressing you out, you don't have to write it. If you're able to write other things, but you are stuck and you can't write this book, a specific book about your trauma, you don't have to write it. You can write other shit that comes easier to you. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, we can make these choices in order to be happier than you are right now. And it seems like at the end, Diane has come to that conclusion, and she seems like she's been able to finally move forward instead of being in that comfortability of being depressed, being in that gray area, being unhappy, because we saw her. She kept self-sabotaging where you could see that she was so used to being depressed. She was so used to things not working out. She was so used to being in that gray area, being unhappy, that was more comfortable to her than when she was happy. And that happens to so many people. And I feel like that was another thing that they parallel even with Bojack. When things were good in any aspect, he would self-sabotage it. He would fuck it up because he's not used to that. But when you are used to being in that gray area and being depressed and being unhappy, or people leaving you and things going wrong or whatever the case is, you know how to exist in that frequency because you're like, okay, well, this always happens. I always get back on my feet. But you exist in there. When things are going too good, you're not used to that. So you're like, oh, hold on now. I don't know how this is going to go, but if I mess it up, then I have the control. When things are going too good, something bad it has to happen, right? Because I'm so used to bad things happening. But if something external changes my circumstances, then I feel out of control. Let me just mess it up myself. At least I know I did it. I'm in control. So anyway, I'm rambling now, but yeah, like I said, Diane and Bojack, they parallel in that way, and I'm rewatching and I'm seeing it. I'm like, damn, they really are birds of a feather, honey. In season 1, when Bojack told that girl at the bar, maybe because you're skinny and pretty, you're used to getting away with things, but I want you to know that your actions have an effect on others. You're a horrible person, and you not understanding that you're a horrible person doesn't make you less of a horrible person. So Bojack is projecting heavily here, right? Because he finds comfort in acknowledging that he's not a good person, as if that's enough, right? Like as if being self-aware makes things better rather than changing the behavior. So he thinks, being self-aware that you're a bad person makes him better than somebody who isn't necessarily a good person, but just doesn't know that they're not a good person. So for example, Mr. Peanut Butter, which is one of the reasons I feel like Bojack really dislikes Mr. Peanut Butter, because he feels like Mr. Peanut Butter should be miserable, just like how he is miserable. Back in season 1, episode 1, before Bojack understood that Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter were dating, he was talking to Diane, he was at the party, and he was looking at Mr. Peanut Butter, and he was just like, he doesn't realize how miserable he should be. And it makes me wonder if that's an added layer to Bojack holding on to his trauma. Especially since Bojack kind of feels like horsing around was kind of like a waste of his life or a waste of time or whatever the case is. And Mr. Peanut Butter had the same type of show, but Mr. Peanut Butter doesn't view it that way. But then also because Bojack he hates when people leaves, but he's like, people always leave. And Mr. Peanut Butter can't seem to keep a marriage going. So even from Bojack looking over at Mr. Peanut Butter, he like, okay, well, people not staying with him either. Why is he so motherfucking happy? So he's like, again, when he tells that girl, you not understanding that you're not a good person doesn't mean that you're any less but like bad person. Like, you're still a bad person. He looks at Mr. Peanut Butter like that. Like, just because you're acting all happy-go-lucky and you may not be conscious of it doesn't mean that you're not a bad person. You're a bad person just like me. But it irritates him that Mr. Peanut Butter doesn't think so. For one, Mr. Peanut Butter thinks that he's a good guy, right? He doesn't realize this until maybe just toward the end. But even then, I don't think Mr. Peanut Butter ever truly said that I'm not a good guy. Pickles told him, you're a bad dog. Like, you're a bad dog, and that hurt his feelings. But we still don't get Mr. Peanut Butter saying, I'm a bad guy. I'm a bad dog, right? He does have some, some growth, but I think that is what also irritates Bojack, to be like, why doesn't he realize that he's not a good guy? Why is he walking around here all happy-go-lucky, like everything's fine, and he's like the best person in the world? He ain't shit either. I ain't shit. He ain't shit. Why are you more happier than me? Why do people like being around you more than me? Like, what's going on? And I think that is what irritates Bojack too. Because he sees someone like Mr. Peanut Butter and wonders what life would have been like if he just chose to live his life differently despite, his childhood. Kind of like how Diane in season 6 really wanted to, write her memoir, right, about her trauma so that it could mean something and that it wouldn't be all for nothing. Because if she doesn't create the memoir, then that means she just could have chose to be happy all those years instead. Like, she could have lived her life differently. And that's when, her boyfriend guy's just like, then just be happy, right? I think Mr. Peanut Butter is a reminder, to Bojack of, what you could be. And Mr. Peanut Butter isn't a good guy either, mind you. But I think Bojack has to keep trying to reassure himself that he's a special case, right? To try to validate all these years that he spent being an asshole and hurting other people and creating victims, right? And when in reality, your trauma doesn't, make you special. Everybody has trauma. Yes, some have had more traumatizing things happen to them and that they've experienced than others, but it doesn't make you special. And that's something that both Diane and Bojack had to learn during this series, is that your trauma doesn't make you special, right? And it doesn't justify you being a terrible person, right? Or creating other victims and ruining other people's lives, whatever the case is. That is still a choice, right? And Bojack continued to make these choices throughout the series. So I just feel like, when I saw him say he doesn't realize how miserable he should be, it's like, for one, yes, misery loves company, but for two, I'm like, so that's really why you mad, right? That's really why you mad. This person had the same type of show that you have, basically almost bar for bar. Like, okay, you're a horse that has adopted these human children. He's a dog who adopted, the human children. And when Diane, first talks to him and she was like, oh, you have a lovely home. And he was like, oh, yeah, when you waste all these years of your life on the stupid show, you might as well get a nice house out of it, right? And Mr. Peanut Butter did the same type of show, but Mr. Peanut Butter doesn't view the show like a waste of time. He doesn't view it like a waste of his life. And so therefore, he's not as miserable as Bojack. Now, mind you, yes, we don't know Mr. Peanut Butter's childhood. We don't know his background in that sense necessarily. But still, it's also your perception on things as well. Because things can happen to you. You can experience things, but if you only take it in the sense of like, okay, I'm going to let that define me. I'm also going to navigate this in an unhealthy way, and I'm going to keep choosing to do this. Because mind you, Bojack, for the majority of the show, he is not in his 20s, right? We are seeing this as he's basically a senior citizen at this point, still making these decisions. He's had a lot of time, right? He has had a lot of time to make better choices, and he still chooses not to, right? Mr. Peanut Butter is older too, but he's chosen to view things differently, to where, again, this doesn't make him a good guy, because he's not, but he is enjoying life better. Even with him not being a good guy and dismissing his, the women in his life and acting like everything's okay and just trying to fix stuff to where he has all these relationships gone wrong, whatever. But he is not miserable, right? He's not really self-aware until toward the end, but he's not miserable. And I think that's an extra layer of why Bojack does not like being Mr. Peanut Butter, because I feel like Mr. Peanut Butter, he's oblivious to certain things. I think he's like, I don't know why Bojack don't like me. I really don't. I truly don't. But this, I feel like, is just one of the big reasons why Bojack don't like Mr. Peanut Butter. It's actually really ironic that Bojack said in that interview that he didn't have power over women, when he indeed did have a lot of power over Sarah Lynn specifically, and just over her life. He heavily influenced her life and just her ideologies on the industry, entertaining her fans, everything. On set of Horsing Around, he tells her, "Those boobs and jerkwads are the best friends you'll ever have." He's talking about the audience. "Without them, you're nothing. Remember that. Your family will never understand you. Your lovers will leave you or try to change you. But your fans, you be good to them and they'll be good to you. The most important thing is you got to give the people what they want, even if it kills you, even if it empties you out until there's nothing left to empty. No matter what happens, no matter how much it hurts, you don't stop dancing and you don't stop smiling and you give those people what they want." And of course, Sarah Lynn looks absolutely terrified, right? But then it cuts to 12 years later to her song Prickly Muffin, right? Which is her dance and pop album, right? But that was the same name Bojack called her on the show. And in her interview with the Ryan Seacrest type, she says, "People like sex and I'm sexy right now, so they like me." And, most people will probably think that, oh, that's just who Sarah Lynn is, especially since the name of her album is I Am Sarah Lynn. But us, the audience, we know exactly who influenced her to think the way that she does, and who also gave her access to alcohol as a child, which was the catalyst for her alcoholism and her excessive drug use, which eventually led to her death. And that same person, Bojack Horseman, was the person who had her break her sobriety that ended up leading to her death. It really makes you think who Sarah Lynn could have been if she would have never met Bojack Horseman, if she would have never interacted with him, if he would have never told her the things that he told her, how her ideology would have been different, right? Even her mother, let's be real, it's not all on Bojack, right? It's not solely on him, even her mother as well. When Sarah Lynn was saying that she wanted to go to college, and her mother was like, "Oh, mommy didn't do what she did to that agent, just so that you can go to college," right? So it's not just Bojack, but it's the adults around her. It really is a nod at the industry and showing that children are not safe in the industry. The industry really isn't a place for children at all. They don't care about children or their well-being. It's all about the money that they can make them. And it's kind of a nod too to not all parents that have their children in the industry, but a lot of parents that have the children in the industry. And even with, the documentaries that are coming out now, and, the documents that are coming out now and things like that. I mean, hey. But yeah, when Bojack Horseman says he has no power over women, he's full of shit and he knows it. So Sarah Lynn's mother is to blame for how Sarah Lynn turned out as well, because we get to see a little bit of their dynamic in the very beginning, season 1, I think episode 3, and Sarah Lynn asked Bojack where he went to college, and the mom says, "Honey, college is for ugly people who can't tap dance." And Sarah Lynn then says, "I want to be an architect." And her mother replies with, "Sweetheart, mommy didn't do what mommy did to that Star Search producer so that you can be an architect." So we see early on that Sarah Lynn's mother is trying to live through her daughter, right? And, she's willing to do anything and everything in order to, get Sarah Lynn to the top. And not only that, right? But she lets Sarah Lynn know that. So it's not like she's doing it behind the scenes and making it seem like, oh, Sarah Lynn just has this talent or whatever the case is. She's letting Sarah Lynn know, oh, no, mommy did this in order to get you in this room, in order to get you on this show. So you better do it. And you better succeed and you better make it to the top. I don't want to hear you talk about no college, no furthering your education, or even if Sarah Lynn had other passions or, dreams that she wanted to do. Shut down because of her mother's quote unquote sacrifices, right? And you know, so we see Sarah Lynn being conditioned already as a child to make it in this industry, or else all of her mother's sacrifices, quote unquote, would be for nothing. Right? Even in the last season where her mother was talking to the investigators about Sarah Lynn's death, and Sarah Lynn was leaving her the voicemail, and she was like, I'm sorry that I was never enough for you, and I'm sorry, I could never really make you happy. And the mother's like, see, she was always thinking about her mother. It's like, even then, you still don't get it. You still don't get it, right? But again, it shows Sarah Lynn's mother was the first person to fail Sarah Lynn, right? And she also had a lot of influence and power over Sarah Lynn's life, not just Bojack. So pair that with Bojack. This little girl didn't have a motherfucking chance, right? And it's just like, if her mom wasn't such a piece of shit, right? Then maybe, just maybe, Sarah Lynn would have turned out okay, because even with all the interactions that she would have had with Bojack and maybe even other people in the industry, she would have been able to fall back on her mother. She would have been able to, get guidance from her parent, right? Because you got to think about it. Even the fact that after Sarah Lynn ended up drinking the vodka that was just open and right in front of her from Bojack, right? Um, Even the fact that her mom put her back on that show. Like, because this is the thing. If you really cared about your children, your child's safety over the money and over the fame, some would say most parents would pull their child out. They'd be like, you know what? Actually, we're good. But when you look at how much money you're making, when you look at the fame and the notoriety, then it's like, well, maybe they won't do it again. Well, they fired the hairdresser, so maybe we could just let her return. Because again, mommy didn't do what she did to that Star Search agent for nothing, right? Just because you had a little drinky drink as a child, and it's just it pisses me off, because it's just like, this girl again didn't have a chance paired with her mama and Bojack. And another thing too is that, these adults around these children, they're trying to fulfill themselves through the children, or they're trying to live out some type of fantasy or something, living through these children. Like, for example, Bojack, when he let Sarah Lynn stay with him in the first season, and basically again enabling her and ultimately hurting her in the process, because you're not helping her, so you're hurting her, right? And Diane's just like, do you think it's possible that you inviting Sarah Lynn to your home is really you just trying to compensate for the past? And he's like, no, Diane, I'm just helping out a friend. I'm not trying to play out some weird sick dad fantasy or resolve a deep guilt for past neglect, or even try to retroactively fix my own childhood by recreating someone else's, when in reality he's doing all three of those simultaneously, honey. And in doing so, he's not helping her, he's hurting her, and he's helping himself. And as long as there are adults or older people or people with power and influence that are, around children, or just people with who are just disenfranchised or whatever the case is, those people are going to get hurt. And children aren't going to be safe around them, point blank, period, because they are unsatisfied with themselves, right? And another thing too, with how Sarah Lynn was acting during that episode too, was just like, she probably got that manipulation from her mother, and maybe not even just from her mother, even people like Bojack, right? Maybe even other people, because when when Bojack was trying to set those boundaries with her of like, okay, look, we need to get these people out the house, you need to go to rehab, whatever the case is, and she was just like, but I thought you cared about me, you said you were always going to protect me, and whatever the case is. It's really sad, because when you think about it, who did she learn that from? Because she wasn't always like that. And you think about the first person who failed her, her mother. Think about when Sarah Lynn, being young, was trying to set boundaries with her mom and tell her that she maybe didn't want to do something anymore, or whatever the case is. I could definitely see her mom being like, oh, but I thought you said you cared about your mother. So if you care about your mother, why are you doing this to me? Or whatever the case. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? And it's just like, damn. Like, that's crazy. It was probably, her boundaries were probably always met with manipulation, right? And so therefore now she's perpetuating that behavior herself. And it's sad because at that point in the episode, Sarah Lynn is 30 years old and she's fully aware of her position in celebrity culture and the transactional nature of all her interactions with people and her relationships, right? And basically, when Bojack tries to take her to rehab, mind you, after he had sex with her, okay? He says, or she says, I'm at a place right now where I never need to grow as a person or rise to an occasion because I can constantly surround myself with sycophants and enablers until I die tragically young. And then she says, yeah, it's pretty much too late for me. And soon after that, when Diane mentions, this is what our celebrity culture does to people, here comes Bojack immediately deflecting, talking about, so what you're saying is everything is society's fault and we as individuals never need to take responsibility for anything. And then he continues with, so I didn't do anything wrong because we're all just products of our environment. And again, that just drives home the point that Bojack is the enabler. Bojack is the sycophant. Bojack is that specific part of society that contributes to that celebrity culture vulture that chews up children and people and spits them out to where many of them do not survive, Sarah Lynn included. It's funny how in the first episode of BoJack Horseman, when he's doing the interview and he's saying that horsing around is a solid show and that for a lot of people, life is just one long hard kick in the urethra. And sometimes when you get home from a long day of getting kicked in the urethra, you just want to watch a show about good, likable people who love each other, where no matter what happens at the end of 30 minutes, everything's going to turn out okay. And it's ironic because although he's played on a show like that for 9 years, his show is nothing like that. And, the very first episode's title is BoJack Horseman, the BoJack Horseman story, chapter 1. On top of the fact that on Netflix it's called BoJack Horseman, right? It's his show. His actual show is nothing like how horsing around made people probably feel, for the people who liked it at least. It's, very dark. It could be very depressing. I will say, chef's kiss with the writing. But it's not about people who like each other. It's not about likable people at all. Like, everybody's like shitty in some way or shape or form, or morally gray characters, or whatever the case is. And I think that ultimately weighed on Bojack as well, having to play someone who was a father, a good one at that, right? Like a good father figure, a likable person. But, in his own life, he was a shitty person. He's playing a father figure. He did not have a good one growing up. So he's cosplaying this happy family man, and to have a happy family, and he didn't have one. And it makes sense too why he always was rewatching the show, because not only was that him in his prime, right? That was when people probably when he was the most likable, quote unquote, because it's like when he got off stage, was he still as likable when he was on stage? Probably not. Probably not, because he was still Bojack. But I'm thinking even on another level, him looking at himself through the screen and looking at, people laughing at his jokes and seeing him surrounded with kids and seeing him being respected and looked at as reliable and dependable. If he looks at that as like an alternate universe, to where if he didn't have such shitty parents and a shitty upbringing, and if he didn't choose to let his trauma define him, and if he chose to live his life differently, even with his trauma, because let's be real, it's still an active choice to be an asshole to people and to, create other victims just because someone made a victim out of you. And it makes me think, does he look at that as like, oh, that could be me, like a alternate universe of me. And it makes it a little bit more depressing when you watch, when you're seeing him drinking, like drinking himself dizzy, and watching it and just watching it over and over and over again. Because usually you hear actors and actresses saying that they don't like watching themselves on screen, and if they will, they'll watch the screening and that's it. They don't like rewatching their work. People don't really like watching themselves speak and act and things like that and be someone who they actually aren't. But Bojack is the opposite. He really loves watching himself be someone who he's not, because who he is, he doesn't like. He doesn't like himself. he knows he's not a good person. So that has to be crazy to see yourself as a good person, and probably deep down somewhere wishing that that was his reality instead. Bojack made Todd relapse so that he wouldn't have to be alone. So, as we know, the video game symbolizes addiction, and Todd explains this to Bojack and makes it pretty clear when he says, it ruined his life. He flunked out of school, his girlfriend left him, and he didn't stop playing until his mother kicked him out of the house. And he got kicked out at 18, and that's when he went to that party at Bojack's house, and then that's when he started staying with Bojack at only 18. And I remember in season 1, episode 4, when Bojack trips over Todd's stuff in his living room, and he was just like, I don't have anywhere to put my stuff because you won't give me a room, you won't give me a closet. Bojack's talking about, you haven't earned it, whatever the case is. And I remember thinking at first, I wonder if it's like a commitment issue with Bojack or a vulnerability issue with Bojack. If he gives Todd a closet, that's him like really letting Todd in, and then it would probably hurt if Todd were to leave. So therefore, he's kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or he doesn't want to admit that he would even allow Todd to be there because that would be admitting that he cares for him. But then when you have the episode with the video game and the addiction, you see that it's really the fact that Bojack doesn't even want to admit that he doesn't want to be alone. He doesn't want to admit that he's terrified of being by himself and being his only company. Like, imagine how miserable and lonely you have to be harboring this 18-year-old for years now. And every day you're spewing negativity into them, basically like clipping their wings, lowering their self-esteem so that they can stay dependent on you. And in season 1, episode 4, he just basically says it. Bojack says, see, you say something to someone enough times, eventually they'll internalize it. The system works. And that was when he was, tearing down Todd again. And he starts being like, oh, well, yeah, I'm really nobody for real. Like, I don't do nothing, this, that, and the third. But just imagine if, this 18-year-old who was, a recovering addict, coming to Bojack, who has a platform, who has money, who has connections, right? And imagine if instead of tearing Todd down for years, he actually gave Todd guidance, or he was even a person who could even do that. Because Bojack's miserable, so he's not going to do that, right? He didn't even have someone do that for him, but he could do it. Because it's a choice. It's a choice. Your actions, everyday actions and, things that you do are choices. But just imagine if, Todd was living with somebody who actually gave him a platform, got him connections, pushed him and encouraged him to get a job, and that you can do it. You could do it, Todd. Like, this is still a young person. Todd's, frontal lobe is not even fully developed. You know what I'm trying to say? And it's like, but then he's with this miserable ass person that literally does not want to be alone. So therefore he's going to keep him down. And it's crazy because he will go as far as knowing that you are a recovering addict, knowing how bad it ruined your life. And then when he sees you actually excited about something, his rock opera or rock musical, whatever it was, right? He sees that you're actually excited about something. He sees that you have potential in actually moving out and doing bigger and better things and having something for yourself. He purposely plants that thing that you're addicted to so that you can relapse. When you already told him and confided in him that it ruined your life. And not only did he orchestrate that, right? Not only did he orchestrate the relapse, but he made it seem like it was all Todd's fault. He just made it seem like it was all Todd's fault, which reinforces and internalizes all of those negative seeds and negative thoughts into Todd. So again, clipping his wings to make it harder for him to leave and to believe in himself. And then what does he do? He gives him the closet. And before he gives him the closet, mind you, he burns the bridges, or he burns the bridge with the people that was interested in his opera. And he even said that. Todd was like, okay, let's not burn the bridge. I can always beg for another chance. And he was like, no, Todd, F y'all, suck a dick. Like, what? Purposely burning the bridge so that he cannot reach back out to these people so that he cannot reschedule. And on top of that, embarrassing Todd. Again, making him internalize that embarrassment, that shame. And then he gives him the closet to make him more comfortable. Now that he saw that, oh, he does have potential that he could leave. Before that, he never thought like, oh, he was just like, well, where is he going to go? No, you could just chill on the couch. He's not going nowhere. But as soon as he saw that, oh, yeah, Todd actually does have potential and he actually could leave, and then I would be alone. That was a threat to him and Todd's dynamic. So, of course, Bojack had to intervene and he had to sink his claws into Todd. And so now, although it seems like, oh, Todd's just a freeloader and he doesn't do anything, this, that, and third, is Todd really free? I don't think Todd was actually, he's not actually free of Bojack until he leaves and moves out. Like, he's not really free of Bojack until, like, Todd is like, oh yeah, like, I'm cool off Bojack, honestly. Like, I haven't talked to him like a year, I'm good. But yeah, although Bojack's mansion may look nice, on the outside it is still a cage. I'll be posting all my Bojack Horseman thoughts on my YouTube, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. So Zoe and Zelda are Bojack and Mr. Peanut Butter. So remember, Zelda was the sunny, fun-loving extrovert. So Mr. Peanut Butter, right? And Zoe was the smart, cynical introvert, which is supposed to be Bojack. So I made this connection in season 1, episode 4, when Mr. Peanut Butter told Bojack that Diane's ex is actually writing an article about him in BuzzFeed. And he was like, you know, her ex is writing an article about me. You know, Diane's writing a memoir about you. We're the same. And of course, Bojack's like, that is not the same thing. A book is not the same as an article. But for Mr. Peanut Butter, he's like, well, there's people writing about us, so it's the same thing. Classic Zelda, right? Looking at the brighter things, looking at the cup half full. And I feel like that was the perfect moment where we get to see how Mr. Peanut Butter and Bojack navigate the world differently, or how they view the world differently, right? Bojack, of course, is glass half empty. Peanut Butter, glass half full. We have the Zoe, we have the Zelda. And although they navigate the world differently, they're received by the world differently. They are both not good people. They are both not good men. And I feel like Zoe and Zelda being twins is supposed to represent that, to where it's like, yes, they were different. They had different personalities, right? But they looked the same. They were twins. Two sides of the same coin. And Mr. Peanut Butter's house makes sense. Like, that show makes sense for him, because I feel like with Horsing Around and Mr. Peanut Butter's house, it's showing what they actually would like to have or would like to live. Like with Horsing Around, you had Bojack having a family. You had him being looked at as somebody dependable, reliable, responsible enough to raise these children. You had people looking up to him. You had Bojack actually being funny. We see all throughout the show, he's always cracking jokes and they're usually never landing. He always has to explain it. He's just not considered funny. He thinks he is, he's not. But in the show, you have an audience that doesn't matter what he says, if it's corny or not, people are laughing. So you have this image he has this image of himself where it's kind of like, well, dang, what if I didn't grow up having shitty parents and I actually had people care about me, and then I didn't turn out so shitty? Is this what my life could have been? And then having to get offset, mind you, cosplaying this and pretending to be this person for 9 years, almost a decade, and then getting offset and you're none of those things. None of those things on set line up and align with your actual reality. And I think that's why in the first episode, when we are introduced to Mr. Peanut Butter, Bojack's like, he doesn't realize how miserable he should be. And it's because Bojack is extremely miserable, especially since Mr. Peanut Butter did a similar show to his, and he's like, how could he be happy about that? Because Bojack feels like he's wasted his life on his show Horsing Around. But you gotta remember, Mr. Peanut Butter's show, Mr. Peanut Butter's house, he was basically just playing himself, right? And I feel like with him having the twins, it's a nod to a few things, right? It's called Mr. Peanut Butter's house. Who's usually in Mr. Peanut Butter's house? It's usually Mr. Peanut Butter and whoever he's dating at the time or married to. And he's usually the Zelda, and they're usually considered like a Zoe compared to him, right? Or even if this person that he's with is trying to be a Zelda and really they're a Zoe. Or to Mr. Peanut Butter, they were a Zelda at first. They were super fun. And then really they outgrew him, right? And he just never grew. And so now they're a Zoe. Because in this episode, season 1, episode 4, we also see Diane's ex being like, you're trying to be a Zelda really bad, but you're so clearly a Zoe. And little by little after that conversation is when we start to see more about Diane. But I think it's also a nod to the very ending of the show, Mr. Peanut Butter's house. Who's in the house? It's just him and Bojack. It's just him and Bojack. They are completely alone and they only have each other. And you have Peanut Butter, who's Zelda, and you have Bojack, who's Zoe. And it makes me think, just like how with Horsing Around, you know, he was playing a character that, yeah, that would have been a preferable reality for him rather than his actual reality of him being so alone and insecure and just miserable and traumatized and just being a shitty person overall and creating these victims. With Mr. Peanut Butter, I feel like Peanut Butter's house is what he would want. Mr. Peanut Butter doesn't want to be alone. Right, especially like a nod to him being a dog and like a what is he, like a Labrador or golden retriever, or a mix of that. He doesn't want to be alone, right? And I think he understands that he's always going to be the Zelda in his relationships, whether it's a friendship or romantic relationship, and he's okay with that. He wants companionship, even if the person is different than him. He's okay with that. But mind you, Bojack and Mr. Peanut Butter aren't the only Zoes and Zeldas, right? That they're all throughout the show, which I will talk about next is Bojack with Todd, with Bojack being Zoe and Todd being Zelda, and how he literally made Todd relapse just so that he wouldn't be alone. Because as we know, the video game was an allegory for addiction. I think that was really clear. I'll be dropping all my deep dives on season 1 on my YouTube, so stay tuned. I feel like that little stunt that Diane's brothers pulled need to be talked about a little bit more. Because what do you mean you guys all took turns acting like a pen pal to your sister, sending her these letters, talking about who knows what, okay, for 6 months? 6 months? Because I could see if you gonna be, if like you just gonna be mean and you gonna break your sister, and y'all just send her one letter, maybe 2. 6 months, even at most, just a letter every day for a week or something, just so that at the end of the week you could be like, oh, pranks on you, even though that's still foul and weird. But 6 months, you guys had a whole relationship. You created a whole relationship with your sister, and then go hire a homeless man to go to prom with her. And I know they didn't get their ass beat for it. I know they didn't get no discipline for it. And my thing, for them to even have the man in the house, I know the parents were on bullshit too, probably just laughing too. And my thing is, did they have him really for real go to prom? Because I'm like, they had him dressed up in everything. Did y'all not care what's going to happen to y'all daughter? It's just too much going on. Just that alone is enough for a villain arc. But I'm like, that needs to be talked about more, because for you to hire somebody to pretend to be this dude that y'all made up in the first place, y'all was basically having like this long distance relationship with your sister. You guys all took turns with that. That doesn't sound right. Can we talk about it? Fuck is going on? And it's so sad because it's like Bojack said, just don't go back. Just don't go back. But it's like, I see this all the time when like people have like ancient parents, ancient family members, but especially the parents, right? It don't matter how bad those parents be treating people. That child will always have that void to where they still want to hear good job, or we love you, or, you know, we're proud of you from those parents. And I think just like Diane said, that's what she wants still. It doesn't matter how much stuff they do. But it's just like, that alone was crazy as hell. Let alone having her come and plan the whole funeral, begging for her to plan the funeral, and then immediately switching up on her. Not even showing up to the funeral. Not even having the dad's body ready, or even being at home for the dad's body to get picked up. I'm not gonna lie, when she crashed out in the bar, I completely understood because what are y'all talking about? Like, what? And this is just a taste that we get from her family. That was like the only episode we got. I couldn't imagine being, just growing up with her family. Like, and that's the same, honestly, even with Bojack's upbringing, it's just like, oh my God, you guys are terrible. But I feel like it's even a little bit different too. It's different, right? Because some people could be like, oh, well, Diane, she had it bad too, because not only did she have shitty parents, she has shitty siblings. So that's more people you got to deal with being shitty to you. But with Bojack, some people be like, well, damn, he was also the only child, so he was the only one getting it. He was the only one getting all that hate, all that, just all type of stuff. But at the same time, not only was Diane's parents doing all that to her, the brothers was doing that to her too, to where I'm pretty sure she did feel like the only child. So I feel like that's another reason why her and Bojack can connect so well. But also, we do see that before we get to see how people carry their trauma differently, right? Because in that episode where we see Diane's family, Bojack was just like, I don't think she could write my autobiography. I don't think she's damaged enough. She's just too put together. And because he's like, oh, again, I'm a special case. I have trauma. Mind you, everybody got trauma. It's just on, different capacities, different levels. So when he sees that her family ain't shit and he sees her crashed out for the first time, he's like, oh. And then we also see that's when we get the next episode. I think it's the next episode or next two episodes where he's like, oh, I'm in love with Diane. On top of the fact that she always listens to him talk all day, but she can understand where he's coming from because of her background too. But I also think it's cool because it's like, okay, we get to see these two people carry their trauma differently. Bojack, on an everyday basis, uses his trauma as a reason to be an asshole and as a reason to be a terrible person and create victims for himself. Even if he says it's unintentional, whatever the fuck, it's still intentional to act that way. But Diane holds it together, and although this is a trauma response, holds herself up to a certain standard and those around her to a certain standard because of her family and because of the things that she's been through with her family. And because her family is that way, she gonna go and do the most to make sure you don't know nothing about them. You wouldn't even think I was related, right? But people hold that trauma differently. So that's even pointing out again how much of an asshole Bojack is. It's just like, it's a choice, sir. You don't have to act this way. And him having that connection with Diane shows, yeah. So she seemed a little bit too put together. How is she acting like this? And this is her family. And yes, I went through the shit I went through, but, oh, I'm a special case. You're not. But yeah, I don't know. We need to talk about that a little more because those brothers is weird as hell. I just find it crazy that when Todd was going to have the opportunity to move out of Bojack's house and, probably make it really big with his rock opera, Bojack sabotaged the whole thing, right? Not only that, he made Todd relapse. But then not too long after that, like the next episode or two, when Todd went to prison because, he had all those people up in Bojack's house and was making money, Todd's bail was only $50. Right? His bail was only $50. And he was about to die up in there. Let's be real. He was messing with those two gangs. They was about to kick his teeth out. He was finna be gone. And Bojack kept hanging up the phone and he just did not. Like, he was over here so worried about Diane. And really, let's be real. It stopped being about Diane a long time ago. It was really about him and his rivalry with Mr. Peanut Butter. Okay? So he over there battling Mr. Peanut Butter. Trying to see whose D is bigger. Right? And he's just leaving Todd in prison to rot, where he was about to die if it wasn't for that helicopter. Pure luck. But you went so hard to go as far as to make me relapse just so that I wouldn't leave. Just so that you wouldn't be alone. Isn't that crazy? I'm sorry, that's sinister as hell. Because when it benefits you, to fuck up somebody's whole life opportunity, to fuck up somebody's whole life, make it seem like it's all their fault and they just don't have no self-control, that they ain't shit as a person, to have them internalize that shit when really it was all you're doing, to fuck up and burn up all their bridges with these people that actually like their work, and then turn around and let him rot in prison when the bail is only $50. I have a feeling, let's say Todd wasn't about to die in that moment at the end of the episode, but I have a feeling like, let's say Todd was just up in there, everything was, he was okay. Life wasn't in danger at the moment. I feel like once the whole rivalry with Mr. Peanut Butter died down and Bojack got bored and he realized, oh, where's Todd? Oh, yeah, he's in prison. That's when he probably would have bailed him out. And who knows when that would have been. But isn't that crazy how, like, Bojack, because he doesn't want to be alone, like, he's willing to go to those type of lengths to fuck up other people's lives just for his own satisfaction? That is insane. And it reminds me of that episode where, again, he had, Todd had all those people in Bojack's house taking photographs, whatever the case is. And he could hear Bojack as his inner monologue. And yes, the first time it was because he was reading the letter from Bojack. But then after that, just like when he had thought, oh, you shouldn't do that, it was Bojack's voice. And that makes me think about it. It's just Bojack and Todd and whoever Bojack has in the house whenever he brings people over. Todd always hears Bojack talk because he loved talking. He loved to hear himself speak, child. Right? To the point where that's his inner monologue. Bojack said it himself. You tell somebody something enough, they're going to start to believe it. Todd hears Bojack all damn day talking down on him, talking about himself, all type of shit, to where Bojack is Todd's little voice in his head. And it's a negative ass voice most of the time. Think about what that does to somebody. Because then how it keeps them down. Because then when Todd moves with Mr. Peanut Butter, and Mr. Peanut Butter, although he ain't shit either, he is more happy-go-lucky. He actually validates Todd, even if it's a dumbass idea. I will say Todd be having a lot of ideas, but sometimes it just be a dumbass idea. They both be having dumbass ideas sometimes, but because they got the funding, Mr. Peanut Butter got the funding and the platform, they make the shit work. But instead of tearing it down, and like, do you remember what Bojack said when he did his rock opera? He said that was worse than like 10 9/11s. Didn't he said some crazy shit like that? That's crazy to say about somebody's art. I'm sorry. Multiple 9/11s, that's just crazy, right? But with Mr. Peanut Butter, he was always affirming him, right? Maybe times where they probably shouldn't have been being affirmed, but he was just making, he was always validating him, affirming him. Oh, that's such a great idea. Oh, you saw how far Todd was able to go? Even though, let's be real, Todd wasn't qualified for half the shit he was doing. But you see how far somebody can go. You see what I'm trying to say? It's just, it really makes you think all those years that he was on Bojack's couch, what he could have done with his life if he wasn't with somebody who was just self-sabotaging, negative as hell, insecure, scared to be alone, and quite literally was clipping his wings every single day. Fucking his mind up every single day. Bojack had the platform. Bojack, he has millions of dollars. There should be no reason that Todd, somebody who, if he really wanted Todd out, he could have been out. He could have helped Todd get a damn job. There should be no reason why Todd was just rotting on his couch for years. It makes no sense at all. The only explanation is just because Bojack was alone and he just kept clipping his wings. Crazy. But you see how crazy that is? How important it is to have people who actually like believe in you, who like, I don't know, that gets me till this day. And also the fact that he started living with Bojack when he was 18. Still formative years in the sense of like your frontal lobe. Because Todd is only 30 by the end of the series. So in the first season, I think he's like, what, 23, 24? But he was already living with Bojack for so long. And he had flunked out of high school. Like, he mentally, you feel me what I'm trying to say? And he's around this negative ass person who doesn't want him to succeed at all. Who wants to keep him in a box. Keep him on the couch. Like a damn pet. Child, I'm telling you, because think about stuff like that really, imagine you got a parent like that, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, friends like that. I'm telling you, they keeping you stagnant. You better wake up. See, now, I don't hate Todd. I definitely can see how people can maybe be annoyed with him, but Todd is like a really good example of like being a product of your environment, but being able to change if you're being poured into. Because remember, Todd started living with Bojack at age 18, but he was addicted to that video game, which again is an allegory for drugs or just addiction in general. So that could be drugs, alcohol, whatever the case is. But they made it seem like it was probably like drugs, right? Because it was so bad that he flunked out of high school, girlfriend broke up with him, and he did not stop until his mother kicked him out. And then that's when he met Bojack at that party, and then he just stayed, and he's been at Bojack's house since then. So that was at 18. In the first season, I believe he's like, what, 24? So that's already a long ass time being around this self-hating, insecure, just negative ass, terrible ass person. And he's not pouring into you or trying to help you get a job or get on your feet. Mind you, he's a millionaire. Bojack's a millionaire. He has the platform. He has the connections. Todd could have been in his own space. He could have sent Todd to school to get his degree, to get his GED, something. He could have done a lot. But mind you, Bojack don't really give a damn about Todd. So the point of the matter is that the opera episode really shows this, right? Because we finally see Todd, have potential to do something and finally get off the couch. As soon as Bojack realizes that, what does he do? He self-sabotages that. He burns the bridges with those people for Todd, and he makes Todd relapse. He pays someone to help him make Todd relapse. And then he makes Todd feel like it was all his doing. Again, like he said, if you tell somebody something enough, they'll believe it, right? To where he knows what he's doing. He's clipping Todd's wings every single day. When Todd showed him the rock opera, he said that was just as bad as 100 September 11s. Are you kidding me? 100 September 11s? But see, that's what I'm talking about. Like, he doesn't want him to succeed. We saw how much Todd grew just in the small time he was living with Mr. Peanut Butter. So imagine the 5-6 years he was living with Bojack, how much he could have done in life if Bojack wasn't such an asshole and a terrible ass person and wanted to keep Todd in a box. So with stuff like that, especially again, I'm thinking about that frontal lobe. We're dealing with Bojack Horseman. He's in his 50s already in the first season. He's surrounded by grown ass people. Mr. Peanut Butter's old. Diane's 35, I believe. Is she 35 the first season, or is it by the end of the season? I forget. She's in her 30s though. Everybody around him is much older than him, and I'm talking about when he first starts living with Bojack, and then even throughout the rest of the series, he's like the youngest one there when it comes to that small crew. We're not talking about Hollyhock or we're not talking about Sarah Lynn. We're talking about with Bojack, Princess Carolyn, Mr. Peanut Butter, Diane, and then Todd. He's the youngest one. Yes, he's a grown man. He's 24, right? And then older as the series goes by. But I'm also looking at, well, how did we get here? How did we get Todd to be like this? And so I'm also looking at the older adults in the room as well. Because that's another thing too. Even how he acts. I know people are like, oh, why does Todd act like that? But again, with the game being an allegory for addiction, and with us knowing like the way how they were framing it, it made it seem like I don't know what drugs it was, but his brain seemed like it's fried, honey. His brain seemed like it's a little fried. And not saying in a way that he can't have ideas, because that's one thing. He's very innovative. He is. And then we get to see he might have gotten that from his mama, because his mama, she had ideas too. But he's very innovative. And that's the thing. He just needed somebody to pour into him or give him the platform, give him the funding. And that's what he got with Mr. Peanut Butter. And so although I will say sometimes it was not executed well, and sometimes the ideas were trash. They were, right? But for people who create things, sometimes they do be having trash-ass ideas. Now, mind you, the one that really rubbed me the wrong way, I mean, there was a few ideas that rubbed me the wrong way of his. But the one I was just like, what the hell is going on? When he had those damn clowns and those kids, I was like, Todd, Please don't piss me off. Fuck is going on? But other than that, yeah, like I can't bring myself to hate Todd because, again, we get to see who he is and it shines through. Like, he's not a terrible person. He ain't perfect. Ain't nobody up in this show perfect. But I'm just saying, especially when we have the epitome of like what Bojack doing things that are just horrid. And like, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. He wants to use his trauma as an excuse. There's no fucking excuse for the things that he's done. And then we see someone like Todd that had no guidance. You know what I'm trying to say? He's surrounded by somebody like Bojack, who is not a good influence at all. We see him surround himself with other people, and then we see him get to grow and become like an executive and actually handle business. Like that, that's crazy. Create businesses and apps and things like that. Good with children. Like, he is caring, right? He's trying to figure out who he is, his sexuality, his interests, right? What he wants to do, what he's good at. And although his life is like a wacky series of, side quests, we're seeing the effects of your environment on the things that you do and the person that you become. And although he could have just been like, fuck you, to Bojack. No, for real, he really just could have been like, fuck you. Especially when he found that motherfucking receipt. He never did that. Yes, at some point he was like, you know what, I'm cool off Bojack. I think I'm good. But he never really gave him a piece of his mind the way he could have. Right? And that's just because at the end of the day, Todd does have a kind heart. Now, again, we can hold him accountable for all the little stuff that he done did, or all the big stuff that he done did. Absolutely. But I personally don't hate Todd. Again, I just feel like his life would have been completely different if, for one, yes, if he would have never got addicted. But for two, also if after that he wasn't in this environment where, for one, you always had Bojack on drugs. This is somebody who is trying to be post-addiction, and he's living in somebody's house who's a damn addict. So that's not even a good environment to be in. He's been in that environment for years. So just imagine if he was actually in an environment that had no drugs, wasn't having parties, he had some type of discipline, some type of schedule, some type of routine, some type of responsibility. Like, I just feel like Todd would have came out completely different. And even then, even though he was in the perfect place to be the worst person, he could have been the worst person because he's living with somebody who's terrible. He still wasn't that. He never was just a all right, terrible person who created all these victims, just like how Bojack did. And I feel like he would have been in an environment where Bojack wouldn't have cared. He could have did anything, basically. As long as he didn't leave Bojack alone, he wouldn't have really cared. But he never went that route. So I just feel like, again, Todd cool. Todd cool. He could do better with some stuff for sure. But Todd cool to me because I'm just like, damn, his life could have went a completely different way. And it's like, I'm looking at the 50-year-old in the room that he living with, and I'm just like, you really just gonna sabotage this boy and keep him stunted so that he ain't shit for real. And thankfully, he ended up getting out from under your foot. But that's really how you gonna do him for real. And he came to you as a kid, as like a young adult, 18 years old. And that's how it is. That's crazy.